Commander, the human is still alive. Kyle Thas froze mid-stride through the observation corridor, his secondary eyes snapping forward in synchronization with his primary pair. Still alive. Two words that should have been impossible. Yet Vexia stood before him, with a data tablet trembling in her appendages, her bioluminescent markings pulsing in erratic distress patterns. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. Clarify, he demanded, though he was already moving toward the reinforced observation chamber. The emergency alert had screamed across his command frequency 17 minutes ago. A breach in Protocol Serenity, the containment system housing the Zix cubs. The last Zix cubs. The last genetic lineage of a species that had been extinct for 340 years before the collective's reverse engineering vault had brought 3 viable embryos back to consciousness. Vital readings from the human show optimal function. Vexia called after him, her voice cracking. Respiratory efficiency 94%. Metabolic rate stable. Neural activity baseline. Sir, she's... Exposure to unfiltered cub emissions would be lethal within 4 minutes to any known species. Kyle Thas's mandibles clicked in agitation. She's been unconscious in that chamber for 53 minutes. The observation deck fell silent when he entered. 6 guards in full containment gear stood frozen at their stations, weapons powered but purposeless. The science team had abandoned their stations entirely, clustering in the far corner like they'd witnessed something their education had failed to prepare them for. Which, Kyle Thas realized with creeping dread, they had. He stepped to the observation window and understood why everyone had stopped functioning. Emma Johnson, the human maintenance technician who'd entered that chamber to replace degraded air filters, was curled on her side on the containment floor, absolutely asleep. Beside her, pressed against her body with their small bodies intertwined with hers, were all 3 Zix cubs. Not merely beside her, bonded to her, their chitinous backs aligned perfectly with her chest and abdomen. One small crystalline head rested in the crook of her neck. The other 2 were using her arms as pillows, their tiny claws gently gripping the fabric of her maintenance suit. And they were glowing. Soft, steady bioluminescence pulsing in synchronized rhythm with her breathing. Medical readings on the cubs, Kyle Thas said quietly. Vexia's voice was barely a whisper. Developmental markers advancing at triple the optimal progression rate. Cognitive neural formation showing 73% acceleration. Their consciousness indices are rising, Commander. They're becoming aware. That's impossible. Yes, sir, it is. The cubs had been functional but dormant for 2 months, properly maintained in their individual incubation pods, biologically sustained, genetically stable, and completely unresponsive to every stimulus the collective's finest minds had engineered. They existed in a state of minimal consciousness, their species' neural development cycle utterly resistant to external acceleration. The scientific consensus was grim. These 3 would remain in that suspended state indefinitely, neither alive nor dead, conscious but fundamentally unable to progress toward self-awareness. But they were progressing now. Kyle Thas turned sharply. Tell me exactly what happened. A junior technician stepped forward, his mandibles trembling. She entered standard maintenance protocol at 0847 hours. Checked the filter columns, initiated replacement sequence. Systems showed normal function. We were monitoring exterior readings only. Internal observation protocols weren't activated for routine maintenance. Why in the name of the progenitors not? She's cleared for Level 3 access, sir. Filter maintenance is classified as non-critical protocol. We didn't... The technician's voice cracked. We didn't anticipate she would stop working. The internal sensors didn't alert us until she'd been stationary for 37 minutes. When we activated internal observation, she was already in the chamber with the cubs. And the cubs weren't attacking her? The silence that followed was answer enough. Kael'thas watched Emma's chest rise and fall in perfectly normal respiration. Her arm curved protectively around the smallest cub, the one with the fractured left mandible that had never healed correctly. The runt. The one they'd secretly prepared for termination should resource allocation become critical. That cub was using her heartbeat as a metronome, its own tiny heart synchronized perfectly with hers. Current contamination readings from human biological matrix, he ordered. Vexia pulled up the data with shaking appendages. Minimal, within baseline human respiration signature. No indicators of the cub's metabolic emissions in her bloodstream, no tissue degradation, no cellular breakdown of any kind. That's medically impossible. Yes, sir, it is. The human made a small sound. Not quite a word. Something between a sigh and a whisper. And shifted slightly. The cubs adjusted with her movement, as though they'd been lying with her for their entire existence instead of the last 53 minutes. Their small bodies flowing with her motion like liquid consciousness. One of the cubs opened its eyes. Crystalline, multifaceted things, bright with something that had never been present before. Awareness. Understanding. Kael'thas felt his secondary hearts kick into acceleration. A Zix cub was looking at him through the observation window. Not seeing him, not noticing him, but perceiving him. Its pupil analogs contracted with what could only be described as curiosity. Override Protocol Serenity, Kael'thas said quietly. Get me, Command. Get me, everyone. And nobody disturbs what's happening in that chamber. He turned from the window to find Vexia staring at him with something that might have been hope or might have been fear. The human, she said softly, isn't violating the cub's biological development. She's accelerating it. Why? Vexia's bioluminescence dimmed. We have no framework for answering that question. And that, Kael'thas understood with crystalline clarity, was the moment everything changed. Emma woke up exactly the way she'd fallen asleep, gradually, then all at once, with absolutely no awareness that anything was wrong. She blinked at the unfamiliar ceiling, took a breath that tasted like recycled starship air, and registered 3 immediate facts. First, she was cold. Second, something small and warm was pressed against her neck. Third, she'd somehow managed to fall asleep on the job again. Oh, come on, she muttered, rubbing her face. Not again. She tried to sit up. The weight against her chest redistributed itself, and she froze. 3 pairs of crystalline eyes opened simultaneously, looking directly at her with an intensity that suggested they'd been waiting for her to wake up. The largest cub, the one she'd somehow mentally designated as Tiny Boss, made a sound like wind chimes being struck by something very small and very insistent. Emma's response was immediate and absolutely certain. Okay, you're adorable. The cubs made identical sounds. The smallest one, left mandible slightly crooked, and therefore obviously the runt, and therefore obviously the best one, made what she could only describe as a purring noise, and pressed its crystalline head against her collarbone. Yeah, I know, Emma said softly, reaching up to gently touch its back. The surface was warm and slightly textured, like touching a computer keyboard made of mother of pearl. You're good babies. Yes, you are. This seemed to be exactly what the cubs wanted to hear. All three shifted positions simultaneously, creating a configuration that would have required significant engineering to achieve comfort-wise. And apparently, they'd just done it, without consulting a blueprint or running calculations. They'd simply arranged themselves against her in the way that worked. And now they were all vibrating with some frequency that she could feel more than hear. Okay, that's genuinely the cutest thing I've ever experienced, Emma said. Way better than Mr. Whiskers and the twins at home. Although you're also way weirder, so I guess we're even. She was still processing the "why am I in a containment chamber with 3 alien babies" question, when the observation window suddenly filled with the most stressed-looking multi-eyed creature she'd ever seen. Kyle Thas's bioluminescent markings were flashing in patterns that probably meant something urgent in whatever alien language this was, and his mandibles were clicking so rapidly they blurred. "Oh, hey!" Emma called out, giving the creature in the window a casual wave. "I'm Emma. Your babies are great, by the way. Really excellent babies. You should be proud." The window went silent for approximately 3 seconds. Emma counted them while the smallest cub made a noise that sounded suspiciously like tiny laughter. Then Kyle Thas's voice came through the chamber's communication system. You're awake." "Yep. Also, fair warning, one of your climate control systems is making a weird noise. It's in the northeast corner of the chamber, I think. Sounds like something's seizing up in the thermal regulation cycle. You might want to get someone to look at that before it completely fails." "The human is critiquing our systems," someone said through the communication panel. A different voice, higher pitched, definitely panicked. "The human is correct," another voice said grimly. "Vexia, pull the maintenance logs. That system was flagged for replacement 3 weeks ago." Emma felt the smallest cub settle more heavily against her, its body temperature rising slightly. She ran her hand along its back, long, smooth strokes, like she'd been doing this with alien cubs forever. "You're okay. You're warm. That's good. Cuddle time is important. Everybody knows that." "She's providing comfort measures." Vexia's voice came through, slightly strangled. "To the cubs, unmediated physical contact." "Wait, you guys don't just observe them?" Emma looked up at the observation window. "Like actually spend time near them? Touch them? Hang out?" The silence that followed suggested this was, in fact, not standard practice. "Listen, I don't know much about fancy alien biology," Emma continued, warming to the topic. "But I've got 3 cats, and let me tell you, they don't develop right if you just feed them and maintain their temperature. They need interaction. They need presence. They need someone to actually, be with them." She's applying Earth-based mammalian social protocols to an entirely different species, someone said through the comm system, a senior voice used to authority, currently using that authority to sound completely bashful. "Yeah, and it's working," Emma pointed out. "Look at them. Look at how alert they are, how responsive. They've got more personality right now than my neighbor's goldfish." Kael'thas appeared in the chamber entrance approximately 4 seconds later, his containment gear hissing open. He stopped short of Emma, every one of his optical organs focused on her with an intensity that suggested he was trying to solve a particularly complex mathematical problem using only observation. "You adjusted the temperature," he said. Not a question. "Yeah, they seemed cold. I bumped it up like 2 degrees. They were huddling together for warmth, which, cute as that is, means they're not actually comfortable. So I just..." Emma gestured vaguely at the climate control panel she'd apparently reprogrammed. "Adjusted it." "Using what methodology?" The same one I use when my freezer gets iced up. You find the warm spots, you adjust the cold zones, you let things equilibrate. Honestly, your system is way easier to work with than my apartment's climate control. That thing's a nightmare. Vexia entered behind Kael'thas, her bioluminescence cycling through what Emma was increasingly certain was a distress pattern. The bioregeneration system, the one that was showing incompatibility markers with the cub's metabolic processing, it's stabilized. It's not just stabilized, it's optimized. Current efficiency rating is 34% above previous parameters. Oh yeah, that thing was on wrong, Emma said conversationally. It was trying to process their biosignature like it was a standard humanoid pattern, right? But they're not humanoid. So it's fighting against their natural patterns instead of working with them. I just recalibrated it to follow their actual biosignature instead of the template. Way easier. She recalibrated a xenobiological containment system using intuition, someone said through the comm system. In the background, someone else made a sound like a creature experiencing an existential crisis. The smallest cub made its wind chime sound again and climbed partially onto Emma's shoulder, settling there like it was the most natural perch in the universe. Emma reached up and gently steadied it, a gesture so automatically maternal that she didn't even think about it. Kael'thas watched this interaction for a long moment. His mandibles stopped clicking, his bioluminescent markings shifted from distress red to something approaching confusion blue. "What is your job classification?" he asked finally. "Facilities maintenance technician," Emma said. "I fix things." "Well, I'm supposed to fix things. Usually I just replace air filters and get out of people's way. But you know, since I'm here anyway." She gestured around the chamber at all the systems she'd apparently repaired without thinking about it. "You fixed our entire containment system through basic maintenance principles," Vexia said slowly. "Is that bad?" "It's impossible," Kael'thas said. "Which means we need to contact command immediately, and possibly have a fundamental conversation about everything we thought we understood about species development." Emma shrugged, which caused all three cubs to shift with her, perfectly synchronized. "I mean, they're just babies. Babies need care. It's not rocket science." Through the communication panel, someone started laughing. Then someone else joined in. Then the entire observation deck seemed to lose it simultaneously. That particular brand of hysterical laughter that comes when people realize they've been overcomplicating something basic for way too long. "I think," Kael'thas said quietly to Vexia, "the human just redefined our entire approach to xenobiological preservation." Without even knowing she was doing it, Vexia agreed. Emma was already humming softly to the cubs, who appeared to absolutely love this development. The smallest one had closed its crystalline eyes, still purring that mechanical purr, completely content. Just another day at work, really. The medical readouts should have made sense. They didn't. Vexia stood in the analysis chamber, staring at Emma's biological scans with something approaching religious desperation. Lethal metabolic exposure. Confirmed. 3 separate independent sensors, all screaming the same data. The human was breathing in compounds that should have begun systemic organ failure within minutes. Her organs were perfect. Optimal, actually. Better than optimal. "Run it again," Kael'thas said from across the chamber, his voice stripped of everything except command authority. Around them, 17 different specialists from 17 different departments had gone completely silent. The kind of silence that happens when people realize the entire framework they've built their careers on is collapsing. "I've run it 9 times, Vexia said quietly. "The results are identical. The human's immune system isn't just tolerating the cub's emissions, it's being enhanced by them. Her cellular regeneration is operating at 40%, above baseline human parameters. Her neural activity shows patterns of neuroplastic adaptation. She's literally becoming more resilient to the environment by existing in it. That violates every principle of xenobiological compatibility, someone muttered from the back of the room. Yes, Vexia agreed. It does. Through the observation window, Emma was teaching the smallest cub how to climb her arm using what appeared to be a combination of patient encouragement and completely ridiculous sound effects. The cub was learning, not passively absorbing data, actively learning, problem-solving, adjusting its approach when one method didn't work. It was showing personality. The behavioral prediction models, Kyle Thas said slowly. What do they indicate? A junior analyst pulled up the data with trembling appendages. Complete failure across all parameters, sir. We built our models on 200 years of Zix's biological data, extrapolated from genetic sequences. Every prediction we made about how the cubs should develop, how they should respond to stimuli, what their social bonding patterns would be. Failed. Vexia finished for him. All of it failed. Because we were predicting based on genetic data. We weren't accounting for... She stopped, looked at Emma through the window. The human was singing now. Actually singing. Some tune in a language the translation systems were having trouble parsing. But the cubs were responding with crystalline resonant sounds that synchronized perfectly with her pitch. She wasn't following a protocol. She wasn't consulting a manual. She was simply being present. We weren't accounting for consciousness, Vexia said finally. For emotion. For the fact that they're not just biological machines. They're beings. The silence that followed was the sound of 17 PhD equivalent creatures realizing they'd spent 200 years studying the wrong thing. Kyle Thas stepped into the observation chamber. Emma looked up, saw his expression, and apparently decided that now was an excellent time to explain her methodology. So basically, Emma said, gesturing casually while the cubs climbed over her shoulders like she was a piece of playground equipment, I figured out pretty quick that these guys aren't robots. They're people. Baby people. And baby people need the same stuff all baby people need. Warmth, food, attention. Someone to talk to. Last night I just sat here and talked to them about my day. About my commute, about how much I hate that the cafeteria ran out of coffee, about my cats destroying my furniture. And they listened, like actually listened, so I kept going. You spent the night, Vexia said carefully, providing emotional support and social bonding through casual conversation. Yeah, because they seemed lonely. I mean, look at them. They're clearly smart, clearly aware. And they were just alone. That's sad. So I fixed it. You fixed it, Kyle Thas repeated. By violating every containment protocol, every safety parameter, every biological isolation standard we've established. I fixed it, Emma agreed, by treating them like living creatures instead of like endangered data points that you guys were terrified of breaking. The words hung in the chamber like a physical force. Vexia felt something shift in her perception, not just of the cubs, but of the entire preservation program. 200 years of optimal conditions, precise temperature gradients, nutritional perfection, genetic monitoring accurate to the molecular level. And they'd been failing the entire time. Not logistically. Logistically, they'd been flawless. Biologically, they'd been missing the entire point. We were succeeding at keeping them alive, Vexia said slowly, while failing at letting them live. Through the observation window, the smallest cub made its wind chime sound and pressed its crystalline head against Emma's shoulder in a gesture that transcended species, transcended biology, transcended everything except one fundamental truth. This small creature was loved, and it knew it. That had been impossible, according to every model, every prediction, every scientific framework they'd built. And yet, here it was, happening, real. We need to rewrite the entire conservation protocol, Kael'thas said quietly. From the beginning, Vexia agreed. And neither of them could stop watching Emma as she hummed softly to 3 baby aliens who were thriving because someone had simply decided to care. It took Kael'thas exactly 6 minutes to make the decision that would reshape the Stellar Protection Collective's entire approach to species preservation. Restructure the entire program around her methods, he said to the assembled senior command, his voice carrying the weight of someone who understood they were ending 200 years of established practice. Everything. Temperature protocols, nutritional delivery, containment design, social exposure, all of it. Sir, we can't simply abandon established xenobiological frameworks without peer review, without proof? Kael'thas gestured toward the observation window where Emma was currently teaching the middle cub how to properly grip her finger. The smallest cub was already attempting to climb her hair. All 3 cubs were displaying behavioral markers that shouldn't exist for another 6 months minimum. The proof is in that chamber. These cubs are becoming conscious. For the first time in the program's history, they're developing personality, emotional intelligence, social bonding. All because a human maintenance technician treated them like living beings instead of biological puzzles. Vexia was already rewriting protocols, her computational appendages flying across multiple holographic displays simultaneously. If we integrate social bonding as a primary developmental requirement rather than a secondary concern, if we account for emotional resonance as a measurable biological factor, the entire model shifts. The cubs don't need optimal isolation, they need optimal engagement. She talked to them, someone said, almost wonderingly, for hours, about mundane things, her commute, her frustrations, her cats. Unpredictable stimulus patterns combined with consistent emotional presence, Vexia said, her bioluminescence cycling through colors of recognition. That's exactly what developing consciousness requires. We were providing predictable perfection, and that's the worst thing you can give a developing mind. Then we redesign everything around variability? Another specialist asked. We design everything around presence, Vexia corrected. Around the presence of a conscious being engaging with them, not protocols engaging at them. In the chamber, Emma was now explaining the concept of afternoon naps to 3 increasingly drowsy cubs who were rapidly surrendering to the inevitable. She hummed while they settled against her. Not a protocol, not a calculated intervention. Just a human doing what humans did when small creatures needed comfort. It was the most advanced xenobiological intervention anyone had ever witnessed. Kael'thas watched Emma's absolute lack of concern for the paradigm shift she'd created. She wasn't aware that she'd just rewritten conservation science. She was focused on ensuring 3 baby aliens didn't fall asleep at an awkward angle that might cause neck strain. I'm assigning her to the program, Kael'thas announced. Full-time. New position, primary conservation liaison. That's essentially a promotion from facilities maintenance to senior xenobiological specialist, someone pointed out. She has no credentials, no training, no... She has something better, Kael'thas said. She has instinct. And apparently, instinct is what we've been systematically removing from our approach for 2 centuries. When Emma finally emerged from the chamber 6 hours later, The cubs were sleeping in a perfect configuration. 3 small, crystalline bodies arranged in a pattern that somehow balanced all their weights simultaneously, centered around where Emma had been sitting. Kyle Thas was waiting with the formal assignment documentation. "So," Emma said, looking at the holographic text with mild confusion, "I'm being promoted because I did my job and then pet your endangered alien babies? You restructured our entire species preservation methodology through basic mammalian caregiving principles," Vexia said. She was still cycling through colors, mostly fond exasperation. "Which is how we're classifying it in the official record." Emma laughed, a sound that somehow perfectly encapsulated the absurdity of the situation. "Back home, we just call that pet ownership. My cats have destroyed more furniture than your protocol has helped species in 200 years. That metaphor is perhaps more accurate than you realize," Kyle said carefully. "Wait, seriously?" Emma looked genuinely amused. "I fixed your whole extinction prevention program by treating your endangered cubs like my cats?" "Essentially, yes. That's either the dumbest thing I've ever done or the smartest thing you've ever let happen," Emma said. She glanced back at the sleeping cubs. "I'm going to go with smart thing, though. Those babies are incredible." "They are," Vexia agreed softly. "Because of you." Emma shrugged with the confidence of someone who just saved an entire species while remaining completely unconcerned about the implications. "Well, I'm still on the clock, so you guys mind if I finally check that air filter system I came in here to maintain 8 hours ago? Seems like I've got job security now, but I might as well finish what I started." She headed toward the climate control panel, humming softly. Behind her, Kyle Thas and Vexia exchanged glances of pure, profound bewilderment. The human had just made their entire civilization's approach to life preservation look like it had been designed by beings who'd never actually met consciousness before, and she was going back to maintenance work like it was Tuesday, 2 weeks into her new official position as primary conservation liaison. Emma had made exactly 3 changes to her working conditions. She'd requested a more comfortable chair, she'd brought her cat's old toys from home to adapt into enrichment structures, and she'd started keeping a coffee maker in the observation chamber because apparently fixing entire civilizations' worth of fundamental errors required caffeine. The cubs loved the toys, loved them with an intensity that suggested they'd been missing the concept of play their entire existence. The smallest one, which Emma had mentally upgraded from Runt to Sir Bites-A-Lot, based on its enthusiasm for gently chewing on everything, had claimed one of her late-period mittens as a personal possession and refused to let it go. Vexia was still cycling through colors of amazement every time she checked the developmental readings. The behavioral complexity they're displaying should take 8 months to develop, Vexia said, staring at her readouts with something approaching religious fervor. They've achieved it in 3 weeks. They've got better things to do than sit around being perfect, Emma said, not looking up from her maintenance reports. She was officially supposed to be monitoring the containment systems. But honestly, she was mostly just sitting there, making sure the cubs didn't strangle themselves with toys designed for creatures with significantly fewer appendages than they possessed. They're learning stuff, playing, developing personality. Sir Bites-A-Lot is already showing signs of being a genuine little jerk, which I respect. His actual name is Zixvan Minor Third Iteration, Vexia said, though she sounded defeated. Yeah, and he's Sir Bites-A-Lot to me, Emma said firmly. Deal with it. The changes had rippled outward faster than anyone expected. Other departments within the collective had begun requesting human integration consultation, for their own endangered species programs. Vexia's research team was publishing papers on emotional factors in developmental biology at a pace that was apparently causing mild panic in traditional xenobiological circles. The concept of human methodology integration was causing actual scientific debates, the kind where senior researchers got genuinely heated about whether centuries of established practice might have been fundamentally missing the point. Nobody had started a full-scale panic yet, but Emma got the sense that was only a matter of time. Kyle Thas visited the chamber every rotation, ostensibly to check on the cub's progress, but Emma had long ago figured out that he was really just watching her work. Watching a human maintenance technician do what an entire civilization's worth of scientists hadn't managed. Simply be present with living creatures and let them develop into what they actually were. We're receiving inquiries from 3 other sector coordinating bodies, Kyle Thas said one evening, sitting in what had become his traditional observation position. They want to know if we can provide human consultation services for their own preservation programs. I'm one person, Emma pointed out, not looking up from her reports. Sir Bites-A-Lot was using her lap as a napping surface, and she wasn't about to disturb that arrangement for anything. You guys are going to need to figure this out yourselves eventually. Perhaps, Kyle Thas said, but I suspect the methodology they're seeking isn't something that can be easily systematized. It appears to require presence, intuition, the willingness to treat other beings as inherently valuable rather than as biological data points requiring optimization. Yeah, we call that basic decency back home, Emma said dryly. It's not usually this complicated. For us, Kyle Thas said quietly, it appears to be revolutionary. Sir Bites-A-Lot made a contented sound and shifted against Emma's leg, and Kyle Thas watched this interaction with the expression of someone whose entire civilization's fundamental assumptions about consciousness and care had been fundamentally rewritten by a facilities maintenance technician and 3 baby aliens. The cubs continued to thrive. Emma continued to hum while working, and the cubs apparently found the vibrations deeply soothing. She continued filling out maintenance reports with cubs draped across her in increasingly creative configurations. She continued to be completely unconcerned about the fact that her mere presence was causing the Stellar Protection Collective to rethink every conservation protocol they'd established in the past 200 years. Never thought I'd need xenobiology credentials to do maintenance work, Emma muttered, signing off on another report. In the observation chamber, Kyle Thas realized that Emma was, in fact, the only person in the entire sector who hadn't grasped the full implications of what she'd accomplished. That seemed appropriate somehow. The cubs were alive, conscious, happy, and it had taken nothing more than one human who decided that living creatures deserved to be treated like living creatures. The collective would spend decades learning to understand what Emma had known instinctively all along, that sometimes the most advanced solution was the simplest one. Sometimes you just needed to care.